Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 10th of June 2022 of the New Delhi edition. Today's DNS shall be covered in two parts, wherein the first part shall be covered by me and the second part shall be covered by Mangal sir. This particular article appears on page number 7. The article is titled as "Is the ban on the wheat exports a good policy?" This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Indian Economy. So in case of India, we have an act known as the Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act 1992. This particular act empowers the central government to regulate the foreign trade. It also empowers the central government to announce the foreign trade policy. This act also empowers central government to prohibit or restrict the import and export of certain commodities into India. Accordingly, this particular act also provides that the central government can transfer or delegate some of its powers to the Directorate General of Foreign Trade. So the Directorate General of Foreign Trade on behalf of the central government can come up with a notification to prohibit or to restrict the import and export of certain commodities. So recently, the Directorate General of Foreign Trade has issued a notification banning the export of wheat from the Indian domestic market. In its notification, the Directorate General of Foreign Trade has highlighted that by banning the export of wheat, we would be able to control the inflation and also ensure the food security for our citizens. However, some of the economists have criticized such a move of the government to ban the export of wheat. These economists have highlighted that by banning the export of wheat, this would have an adverse impact on our agricultural exports. This will also hurt the farmers' income, and in a way, we will also not be able to control the rising inflation. So, the recent ban on export of wheat has created intense debate or a controversy. So, accordingly, this particular topic becomes extremely important from the perspective of the upcoming mains examination. So, as far as the mains examination is concerned, one should be able to carry out a critical analysis of the government's move to ban the export of wheat. So as part of critical analysis, you should have at least 4 to 5 points as to why the government has decided to ban the export of wheat, and around 4 to 5 points as to why such a ban on export of wheat is counterproductive. So this is what is important as far as the mains examination is concerned. From the perspective of prelims examination, one should be aware about the trends in the wheat production, both at the global level as well as the domestic level. One should also be aware about the present legal framework for ban on export, that is the Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act 1992. So all of these aspects which are important from the perspective of the prelims, I have already discussed this in the DNS dated 2nd of May 2022. So I shall not be going into the prelims related aspects once again. My main focus here will be on the mains related aspect, that is a critical analysis of the ban on export of wheat. So based upon our discussion, a mains question for your practice here could be: the doubling of farmers' income needs doubling of agricultural exports. In the light of this statement, critically analyze the recent step of the government to ban the export of wheat. Further, based upon our discussion, you should also be in a position to attempt these 4 prelims questions for practice. So let us start our discussion with respect to various aspects, wherein we'll first understand as to why we must boost agricultural exports from India, and then we'll carry out a critical analysis of the recent government's move. So as far as the prelims related aspects is concerned, even though I have discussed all of these aspects in the DNS dated 2nd of May 2022, I have incorporated the pointers in this particular slide so that it becomes quite easier for you to revise all the aspects related to the ban on export of wheat later on. So let's start with the discussion of why we should boost the agricultural exports from India. Now, if you have a look at the present status of the agricultural exports from India, even though India is considered to be among the largest producers of the agricultural commodities such as food grains, fruits and vegetables, etc., India's share in the global export of agricultural commodities is hardly around 2%. India is presently placed at 9th rank when it comes to the export of agricultural commodities. So even though India is among the largest producers of agricultural commodities, we have not been able to export the agricultural commodities to other countries, which in turn has led to the stagnation in the income levels of the farmers. Now, for example, as per the Situation Assessment Survey of the year 2017, the average monthly income of the agricultural household in case of India is hardly around 10,000. So you can see this kind of anomaly wherein even though the overall production of agricultural commodities has increased, the farmer's income level has not increased commensurately. So by exporting the agricultural commodities from India, we would be able to increase the overall income levels of the farmers and hence realize the vision of doubling the farmers' income. So here, with respect to the need for boosting agricultural exports, first and foremost, even though there has been increase in production of agricultural commodities, the farmers have not got benefited. This is so because as the production of agricultural commodities has increased, there has been decrease in the prices of agricultural commodities such as rice, wheat and so on. So if you are able to export such agricultural commodities to other countries, obviously we would be able to increase the income levels. Secondly, presently there is huge demand for the Indian agricultural commodities in other markets. For example, if you look at the wheat can be exported to a number of countries such as Egypt, Indonesia, Turkey, Nigeria and so on. But so far we have not capitalized on this opportunity to export wheat to other countries. So we can cater to the increased demand for the agricultural commodities in other markets by boosting the agricultural exports. Thirdly, see, the government of India, as you know, has come up with a vision of doubling farmers' income by the end of 2022. Similarly, the government of India has also come up with the Agricultural Export Policy 2018. Under this agriculture export policy, the government of India has sought to double the agricultural exports from India from $30 billion in the year 2018 to $60 billion by the end of 2022. So it is being said that if you are able to double the agricultural exports from India, automatically we would be in a position to double the farmers' income as well. Now coming to the critical analysis of the recent ban on export of wheat, starting with what are the main reasons for putting a ban on export. See, first and foremost, this year there has been intense heat waves in the central part of India, that is the major wheat growing regions of UP, Madhya Pradesh and so on. So because of the intense heat waves, there has been decline in the overall yields of the wheat, leading to decrease in its production. In fact, for the first time since the year 2015-16, the domestic production of wheat has declined by 3%. So as the domestic production of wheat has declined, this in turn has led to the rising inflation or rising prices in wheat. So the government expects that by banning the export of wheat, the domestic availability of wheat would increase, and increased domestic availability will automatically bring down its prices. Secondly, see, Russia and Ukraine, both these two countries alone account for almost around 25% of the global wheat exports. But on account of the Russia-Ukraine war, there has been supply chain disruptions in the supply of wheat, which in turn has led to the rising wheat prices in the global market. So if you look at the farmers in case of India, they have basically two options once the wheat is harvested. Either they can go and sell the wheat to the Food Corporation of India wherein the Food Corporation of India will pay them a price which is equivalent to the minimum support price. Option number 2 is they can go and sell the wheat to the traders or to the exporters. And ideally, these exporters or the traders should have to pay a price which is higher than the minimum support price. Usually what happens is, most of the years, the farmers in case of India, they sell more amount of wheat to the Food Corporation of India. But this year, as I said, the global wheat prices are at all-time high. So the exporters as well as traders in case of India have seen this as an opportunity to export wheat to other countries and earn more amount of profits. So accordingly, what has happened is, this year, the exporters in case of India, the traders in case of India, they have bought more wheat from the farmers, and in fact, they have paid higher prices also to the farmers to procure this particular wheat. So the farmers this year, they have sold more wheat to the traders and to the exporters so that the Indian wheat can then be exported to other countries. So what has happened here is, as more amount of wheat is being exported to other countries, the domestic availability of wheat will obviously come down. So as the domestic availability of wheat comes down, its prices, that is the domestic prices, will increase, and this will in turn affect the consumers. So here, as you can see, whenever the prices of agricultural commodities increase, this will obviously benefit the farmers. But if the prices increase, this will go against the interest of the consumers. So here, what the government has done is, in order to reduce the prices of the agricultural commodities and to benefit the consumers, the government has decided to ban the export of wheat. This is the second reason. Third reason is, this time the amount of wheat which is procured by the Food Corporation of India, it has got reduced to 15-year low. So as I said, during normal cropping seasons, most of the wheat is actually sold to the Food Corporation of India. So the Food Corporation of India maintains certain amount of wheat as a buffer, and the remaining wheat is then distributed through the network of the fair price shops, that is the public distribution system. So but this year, the amount of wheat which the Food Corporation has bought has declined to a 15-year low. So the government believes that in future, this can actually lead to lower buffer stocks, and this can also affect our ability to meet our food security needs, that is under the public distribution system. So these are the basic reasons as to why the government has decided to ban the export of wheat. But as I said, some of the economists have questioned such a move by the government. These economists believe that if we have banned the export of wheat, it will go against the interests of the Indian economy, it will go against the interests of the farmers, and against the interests of the Indian agriculture as well. How is that? Let's understand that. See, first and foremost, as I said, Russia and Ukraine export almost around 25% of the global wheat. Most of this wheat from Russia and Ukraine is exported to countries such as Egypt, Indonesia, Turkey, Nigeria, Italy, and Bangladesh. So on account of the Russia-Ukraine war, both these two countries were unable to export wheat to these countries. So accordingly, this was a huge opportunity for us to capitalize on the global supply chain disruption. So India could have actually captured the wheat market in the countries such as Egypt, Indonesia, Turkey, and so on. So accordingly, in future, we could have exported more wheat to these countries, which in turn could have benefited the Indian farmers. But now, since we have banned the export of wheat, now we have lost this opportunity. Maybe the other countries will come into play, and other countries will start exporting wheat to these countries, and we have lost this opportunity. This is what some of the economists say. Secondly, see, one of the stated goal or the aim of the government to ban the export of wheat is to ensure that we have adequate amount of buffer stocks so that we are able to meet our food security needs. But as per the media reports, the buffer norm as far as wheat is concerned is 75 lakh tons. But presently we have more than what is the buffer requirement. That is, presently we have almost around 190 lakh tons of buffer stocks. So even without banning the export of wheat, we would have easily met our food security needs. We could have easily maintained buffer, and we could have also distributed wheat through the network of the public distribution system. Thirdly, see, as I said before, as per the Situation Assessment Survey 2017, the average monthly household income of the agriculture household is hardly around rupees 10,000. So by boosting the agricultural exports from India, we could have actually increased the income levels of the farmers. Now, for example, as I said earlier, this year, the exporters and the traders, they paid more prices to the farmers in order to procure more amount of wheat from them. But now what has happened? We have banned the export of wheat. So as we have banned the export of wheat, the prices of wheat in the domestic market are set to come down. And if the prices come down, then obviously the amount of income which the farmers would earn, that will also get reduced. Now coming to the last reason, that is the adverse impact on the agricultural exports. The ad hoc and sudden ban on export of wheat has dented India's global image as a reliable exporter of agricultural commodities. So in future, other countries may be reluctant to enter into any kind of contract to buy the wheat from India. Now just imagine here, just before putting a ban on export of wheat, the government of India was trying all the possible means to increase the export of wheat to countries such as Egypt, Indonesia, Turkey, Nigeria, and so on. So just 1 week before, the government was trying to export wheat to other countries, and suddenly 1 week later, we decided to put a ban on export of wheat. So this clearly shows a kind of ad hoc and knee-jerk reaction when it comes to the export of agricultural commodities from India. See, to be fair, both to the government as well to the economists who have been criticizing the government move, we must understand that government must protect the interest of both consumers as well as the farmers. So as I said earlier, if the prices of the agricultural commodities increase, it will benefit the farmers, but it will go against the interest of the consumers. So how should the government of India balance the interest of the consumers as well as farmers, particularly when the prices of the agricultural commodities is increasing? Should the government go for ban on export so as to protect the interests of consumers, or should the government of India give complete freedom to the exporters to export the agricultural commodities to the other countries in order to benefit the farmers? So whose interest should we take into consideration? So here, the government of India should actually adopt a more balanced and nuanced approach. So here, rather than going for an outright ban on export of agricultural commodities, the government should actually go for a regulated export policy. So in case of wheat exports, here, instead of putting an outright ban on export of wheat, the government should have come out with a wheat export policy. So here, the government should have laid on as to how much quantity of wheat can be exported to other countries. So that rather than putting a complete outright ban, we could have put a kind of limit on how much of wheat can be exported to other countries. And this quantity we could have fixed taking into the consideration the buffer stock requirements and our requirement of food security needs. We could have also fixed this quantity depending upon the prices that we want in the domestic market. So rather than outright ban, a regulated wheat export policy could have been more appropriate. Apart from that, as I said, the procurement of wheat by the Food Corporation of India has reduced to 15-year low. So here, much before, the government could have announced a kind of bonus over and above the minimum support price. So by announcing the bonus, the Food Corporation of India could have actually procured more amount of wheat from the farmers. For example, let's say the MSP for wheat was rupees 2000. So the government could have announced a bonus of say rupees 200 over and above the MSP and should have procured the wheat from the farmers at rupees 2200. So by doing that, the Food Corporation of India would have actually built sufficient amount of buffer stock and would have also met our food security needs. And secondly, as far as exporters are concerned, the government of India could have also imposed the minimum export price on the wheat so that we are actually able to regulate the amount of wheat which we are exporting to other countries. So once we put a minimum export price on wheat, the exporters will not be able to sell the wheat at below the minimum export price. So this can actually increase the domestic availability of wheat and at the same time help us boost the wheat exports from India. So rather than a knee-jerk and ad hoc reaction, the government should have taken a more balanced and nuanced approach. Government should have regulated the wheat exports from India, and by doing that, it could have benefited both the consumers as well as the farmers. So these are some of the important aspects which one should know as far as this particular article is concerned. So let us have a look at some of the prelims questions for practice, starting with the prelims MCQ number 1. Which among the following steps are likely to be taken to control the inflation in the Indian economy? First one is increase the customs duty on essential items. Now, for example, in case of India, oil seeds are considered to be essential items. Even the edible oils are also considered to be essential items. Let's say there is a rising inflation in the edible oils. So in case of inflation in the edible oils, what would you do to the customs duty? Would you increase the customs duty or would you reduce the customs duty? Obviously, during inflation, especially in the edible oils, we would have to decrease the customs duty so that we are able to import edible oils from other countries at a lower customs duty and reduce its prices. So the first option which is given here is wrong. Ban on export of certain items, which is obviously correct. Increase in policy rates by the RBI, which is obviously correct, and the right answer would be 2 and 3 only. Now coming to practice MCQ number 3, with respect to India's agriculture trade, consider following statements. Being one of the largest producers of the agriculture commodities, India is among the top 5 exporters of agriculture commodities. This statement is wrong. India is presently ranked at 9th place with respect to export of agriculture commodities. In terms of value, marine products account for the highest share in the agriculture export basket. This is correct. In terms of value, pulses account for the highest share. Here it's not pulses, here rather it is vegetable oils which account for the highest share among the agriculture imports. So the right answer is 2 only. As far as practice MCQ number 2 is concerned and 4 is concerned, please try to attempt these 2 questions on your own and let me know the answer in the comment section given below. Now, the next article appears on page number 9, that is a text and context page. The article is titled as The Indian Patent Regime and its Clash with the US Norms. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Indian Economy. See, in case of USA, there is a law known as the United States Trade Act 1970. Section 301 of this particular act requires the US government to recognize all the countries with weak IPR protection regime. So whichever country does not provide adequate amount of protection to the intellectual property rights of the American companies, all such countries are placed in the priority watch list in the special 301 report. So India, along with 6 other countries, has been placed in the priority watch list in the special 301 report which the US government has recently published. Accordingly, this particular article here discusses as to what all concerns has the US government raised with respect to the protection of intellectual property rights in India. Accordingly, as far as this particular article is concerned, you should be aware about various aspects. That is, you should be aware about the TRIPS agreement, then about the Indian Patents Act 1970, various provisions related to the patents, and some basic details about the special 301 report, which I have already explained. Further, as you can see, in prelims 2019, we had this particular question related to the patents regime. So based upon our discussion, you should be in a position to attempt these 4 prelims questions for practice. So what we will do here is, first and foremost, we'll start with the very basics. We will understand everything related to the patent regime. So once we discuss about the patents, then we'll discuss the concerns raised by the US government with respect to the protection of the IPR regime in India. So as far as patents are concerned, most of you must already be aware that once a person is issued with a patent, such a person would have exclusive right to use or sell either the patented product or the patented process for certain period of time. So normally the patents are valid for a minimum period of 20 years. So for example, let's say you have a particular pharma company. This pharma company has spent substantial amount of money in research and development, and let's say it has come up with a new cancer drug. Now, if this company releases a cancer drug in the market, and if other pharmaceutical companies start to copy the same cancer drug and sell the cancer drug in the market, then the company which has spent billions of dollars in the research and development, such a company will not be able to recover the cost. So according here, what we do is we provide for a patent to this particular pharma company. So by providing with the patent, this pharma company will have exclusive right to manufacture this cancer drug for the next 20 years. So the idea here is, on one hand, we are enabling this pharmaceutical company to recover its research and development expenditure, and it also acts as a kind of incentive for the other pharmaceutical companies also to invest more amount of money on research and development. So that is the basic idea. So the patents are basically given for the production of new kind of inventions, which can be a kind of global good for the entire humanity. Patents are basically of two types, that is the product patent and the second one is the process patent. If a person has been issued with a product patent, such a person would have the monopoly over the entire product itself. In case of process patent, here a person gets a monopoly only over the process to manufacture the product. For example, let's say a particular person has got a process patent to manufacture a particular chemical compound. And let's say the process which this person is using is A, B, C, and then he is creating this chemical compound. So here, this particular process, that is the ABC, will be the process that will be patented by this particular person. But what can also happen in case of process patent is, this chemical compound, as you know, it can be manufactured by a different process altogether. For example, another person can use the process of X, Y, Z to manufacture the same chemical compound. So in this case, this person who is using the process of X, Y, Z, he will be given the process patent to manufacture the chemical compound. So only this person can use this particular process, and the other person can use only this ABC process to manufacture the chemical compound. But as you can see, both these persons can manufacture the same chemical compound, but the process which they have to use should be completely different. But in case of product patent, here the person has an entire monopoly over the product itself, which means only that particular person can manufacture the product and no one else can manufacture the same product. So if you compare the product patent and the process patent, we can see that the product patents offer much higher production in comparison to the process patent. So if you get a product patent, only you can manufacture the product, but if you get a process patent, then along with you, others can also manufacture the same product, but others would have to use a process which is different from your process. So that's the basic difference between the product and the process patent. With respect to the production for patents at the global level, we have the trade related aspects of intellectual property rights agreement, which came into being under the World Trade Organization in the year 1995. So the TRIPS agreement provides for the protection of various intellectual property rights such as patents, copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets, and so on. When it comes to India, in case of India, we have the Indian Patents Act 1970. According to Indian Patents Act 1970, in order to get a patent in India, there is a requirement of threefold criteria. So these three criteria would have to be fulfilled. The first criteria is that of novelty. Novelty here means it should not be published either in India or anywhere else, and there should be no prior public knowledge about such a product or such a process either in India or abroad. So that's the first thing. So the product or the process should completely be novel. Second criteria is that it should be of inventive step. Inventive step means the product or the process should be technologically advanced in comparison to the existing technology. And second, the product or the process should be non-obvious even to the person who is working in the same technological field. So basically here the idea is that a new product or the new process should be technologically superior. And the third criteria is such a product or the process should be capable of industrial application. So only when these three criteria are fulfilled, a particular product or a process can be patented in India. With respect to the applicability of patents, please understand here that patent is a territorial right. For example, if you apply for a patent in India and if you get a patent, such a patent will be effective only in India. If you get a patent in India, it does not mean that automatically you would get a patent from US. So there is no concept of a global patent. So you as an individual, you would have to separately file for patents in other countries. So for example, let's say you have a pharmaceutical company based in India. Such a pharmaceutical company has come up with a cancer drug. So before releasing this cancer drug in the Indian domestic market, it will file for a patent and get the patent in India. And secondly, if it is releasing this particular cancer drug, let's say in US, before releasing this cancer drug in US, it will separately file for a patent in US also, because patent is a territorial right. So once you get a patent, the patent is applicable only within a particular country. But at the same time, you must understand that at a global level, we have a separate treaty known as the Patent Cooperation Treaty. This particular treaty is administered by an organization called as WIPO, which stands for World Intellectual Property Organization. So under this particular treaty, a person can also file for a single international patent which will be applicable to all the member countries of the Patent Cooperation Treaty. So here, a particular pharmaceutical company would have two options. It can file an application in a particular country and such a patent would be applicable only in that particular country, or this pharmaceutical company can also file for an international patent application under the Patent Cooperation Treaty. So once this patent is accepted, such a patent would be acceptable to all the member countries which are part of the Patent Cooperation Treaty. Now coming to some important exceptions under the TRIPS agreement, wherein the first and most important exception is the exception of the compulsory licensing. So what exactly is compulsory licensing? Now under compulsory licensing, if the government of a particular country believes that a particular life-saving patented drug is extremely costly and unaffordable to the poor people, then in such a case, the government can issue license to a third-party entity to manufacture the life-saving patented drug and sell that patented drug at much lower price. Now, for example, in case of India, we used to have a drug known as Basava, which was used to treat the kidney cancer. This Basava drug was patented by a German-based company known as Bayer. Now, since Bayer had exclusive monopoly to sell this life-saving Basava drug, Bayer was selling this particular drug at extremely high prices. For example, according to media reports, the monthly dosage of the Basava drug for the patients suffering from kidney cancer, this was as high as rupees 2.8 lakhs. So this is the amount which the people had to spend on a monthly basis for their treatment. So since this was unaffordable, since it was extremely costly, the government of India issued the compulsory licensing to a domestic pharmaceutical company known as Natco Pharma. So here it asked Natco Pharma to start manufacturing the Basava drug and start selling the Basava drug at much lower price. So because of the compulsory licensing, the cost of Basava actually came down from rupees 2.8 lakhs to just around rupees 8,800. So you can understand the significance of compulsory licensing. So if there is any life-saving patented drug which the government believes is costly, then the government can bring down its prices by issuing the compulsory licensing. Please do understand here that to issue compulsory licensing, there is no need to take prior approval from the patented holder, which means in this case, there was no need for the government to take prior approval from the Bayer company which earlier used to manufacture the Nexavar drug. Apart from that, there is also a provision wherein whatever drugs which we are selling in the Indian domestic market through the compulsory licensing, these drugs we can actually also export even to the least developed countries as well. So please remember this particular exception. The second exception is the exception of parallel or grey imports. Now, under the parallel or grey imports, a particular country can import a life-saving patented drug from other country where it is sold at a much cheaper price. Now, for example, let's say you have two countries, country X and country Y. In country X, a particular drug is being sold at $100, and in country Y, it is being sold at $50. So here the country X can exercise parallel or grey import. So here the country X can actually import this particular drug from country Y where it is sold much cheaper. So these are the two important exceptions which have been provided under the TRIPS agreement itself. Lastly, what cannot be patented in India? Please have a look at the list. First and foremost, frivolous inventions, invention that affect public order, morality or health of plants and animals, traditional knowledge, computer program. So please have a look at this. Computer program cannot be patented. The protection of the computer programs is done through the copyrights. So the computer software and programs are actually copyrighted rather than being patented. Next we have plants and animals cannot be patented, and mere discovery of scientific principle can also not be patented. So these are some important basics related to the patents. Now coming to various concerns raised by US with respect to the IPR protection in India in its special 301 report. The first concern is with respect to section 3D of the Indian Patents Act 1970. This particular section basically seeks to prevent the evergreening of patents in India. So what do you mean by evergreening of patents? Now let's say you have a pharmaceutical company which has got a patent over a particular drug, and since it has got a patent, it could have the exclusive monopoly to manufacture this particular patented drug for the next 20 years. So after 20 years, other pharmaceutical companies can manufacture this drug. So here, this pharmaceutical company which has got the patent over this particular drug, what it can do is, just before the expiry of its patent, this pharmaceutical company can add minor modifications. It can add minor compounds to this particular patented drug, and it can claim that the overall efficacy of this patented drug has improved. And accordingly, this pharmaceutical company can seek for an extension on the patent on this particular drug. And let's say we give an extension. So what this company would further do is, after another 20 more years, it would add another modification, it would add another compound, and then once again seek for an extension of patent. So if this pharmaceutical company keeps on adding minor modifications, minor compounds to the drug, and keep on claiming that the efficacy of the drug has improved, then the patents, which should ideally be valid only for 20 years, they would become evergreen. So in order to prevent such minor tweaks, minor modifications, and to prevent further extension of patents, the section 3D seeks to prevent the evergreening of patents in India. In fact, the constitutional validity of section 3D of the Indian Patent Act 1970 was upheld by Madras High Court, which ruled that this particular section is quite important because it helps us distinguish between real innovations and trivial tweaks. So the section 3D of Indian Patents Act is basically a cause of concern for the US pharmaceutical companies. The second aspect is with respect to compulsory licensing. wherein the US government believes that if the government of India keeps on issuing the compulsory licensing, then it would go against the interest of the US pharmaceutical companies. The third concern is with respect to high custom duties on intellectual property intensive products such as medical devices, pharmaceuticals, ICT products, solar energy equipment, and capital goods. So the US government believes that since India is imposing high customs duty on such IP intensive products, the US companies are not able to gain a foothold in the Indian domestic market. The next aspect is with respect to poor enforcement of the intellectual property regime in India. So the Special 301 report has highlighted that India is one of the key producer and exporter of counterfeit goods such as the counterfeit foodstuffs, pharmaceuticals, perfumes, cosmetics, textile, footwear, and electronics equipment. The report has further highlighted that almost around 55% of the global seizures of the counterfeit pharmaceuticals have originated in India. And the last concern is with respect to large-scale delays with respect to obtaining the patents, where the report has highlighted that the time taken to get a patent in India is quite higher in comparison to other countries. So these are some of the concerns that the Special 301 report has highlighted with respect to the IPR protection in India. So based upon our discussion, please have a look at these 4 practice questions and let me know the answer in the comment section given below. As far as the practice MCQ number 3 is concerned, even though I have not discussed about the medicine patent pool, I would want you to find out about the medicine patent pool on your own and let me know the answer in the comment section given below.
This article on page number 6 is related to the Indus Water Treaty that was signed between India and Pakistan back in 1960s. Now in this article, the author highlights that the Indus Water Treaty can be an example of how the water conflicts between two countries can be managed effectively. So in this, he argues that despite the differences, the Indus Water Treaty is one of the most effective examples of water management in the world. Now this is primarily because India and Pakistan have been involved in dispute since 1947 when Pakistan was created by partitioning India. And since then we have had our share of differences. But despite these differences, the Indus Water Treaty has been an example of how both these countries have managed the water dispute related to river water sharing effectively. In this context, let us look at the basic details of the Indus Water Treaty, what are its key provisions, how differences and disputes are handled by this particular treaty, and when the issues have been arised, what has been the course of action in those particular disputes. And finally, what are some issues that are associated with the Indus Water Treaty that needs to be addressed now. Further, since the treaty was finalized in 1960 and since then almost 60 years have passed, concerns have been raised and dissatisfaction has been shown by both sides, India and Pakistan. So let us look at what are the emerging issues associated with this treaty and what are some of the suggestions which highlight that the treaty should be renegotiated in terms of the emerging issues that are there on hand like climate change, etc. So let us look at all these aspects which can be important for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view in the topic international relations, and also some of the details of the Indus Water Treaty can be important for us from the prelims examination perspective. So let us look at this issue from all these perspectives in detail. Now if you look at the location of India and Pakistan, the border between India and Pakistan is not natural and it has been artificially drawn. This is primarily because the border between India and Pakistan is not divided by, let's say, a mountain range or any other natural physical feature. And that is why there are rivers which enter from India into Pakistan. And both these regions are dependent on the water of these rivers. The primary example of this is the Indus River water system. In the Indus River water system, there are different tributaries of Indus like Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas and Satluj. And all of these start from India and then they enter into Pakistan and join the Indus River. And that is why at the time of partition there was concern that how the water of these rivers would be utilized, because Pakistan shared the skepticism that India would stop the flow of water of all these rivers into the Pakistan. and that is why a treaty was negotiated by the World Bank between India and Pakistan, and this treaty is known as the Indus Water Treaty. So it was signed in 1960. Now let us look at certain provisions of this treaty and what are its basic features. So regarding the Indus Water Treaty, it was signed in 1960 between India and Pakistan, and it was assisted by the World Bank, which is also a signatory. So this is an important fact that we need to know. Further, this treaty allocates the use of western rivers, that is the Indus, Jhelum and Chenab, to Pakistan, while the eastern rivers, that is Ravi, Beas and Satluj, have been allocated to India. Further, this treaty allows each country certain uses on the rivers allocated to the other country. For example, these western rivers have been allocated to Pakistan. However, despite such allocation, India can also make use of the water of these rivers. Now, for example, the western rivers, that is Indus, Jhelum and Chenab, they have been allocated to Pakistan. So in this case, India can also use the rivers like Indus, Jhelum and Chenab only for certain specified uses. And as far as the eastern rivers which have been allocated to India, all the waters of the eastern rivers shall be available for unrestricted use of India except otherwise expressly provided. Now, when you compare the rights of India over the waters of the western rivers and the eastern rivers, the rights of India are more on the eastern rivers. In that case, India can use this water for any particular use, which can be consumptive use. For example, India can create storage dams which can be utilized by India. However, in case of western rivers, India cannot create storage dams which store waters because that is not provided under this treaty. And that is why there are continuous disputes and differences between India and Pakistan regarding the provisions of the Indus Water Treaty and its implementation. Now, as India has been provided the right to use the waters of the eastern rivers in an unrestricted manner, which include Ravi, Beas and Satluj, and accordingly, India has created important storage dams on these rivers. However, India's rights over the western rivers are highly restricted, and these rivers include Indus, Jhelum and Chenab. However, in case of these western rivers also, India has been provided certain rights which have been provided for in the Indus Water Treaty itself. And as such, India is allowed to make some use of the waters of the western rivers as well, and these uses can include domestic use, non-consumptive use, agricultural use and generation of hydroelectric power. Now, domestic use simply means that the water can be used for drinking, washing, bathing, recreation, sanitation, poultry, household and municipal purposes as well as industrial purposes. As far as the non-consumptive use is concerned, it means it can be used for navigation, floating of timber or flood protection or flood control measures, also for fishing, fish culture, etc. As far as agricultural use is concerned, it simply means use of water for irrigation, except for the irrigation of household gardens and public recreational gardens. And as far as the generation of hydroelectric power is concerned, in that case, India can create run-of-the-river hydroelectric projects. Now, these run-of-the-river hydroelectric projects are different because they do not store water into the dams and then produce electricity, but they simply utilize the flow of the water and its kinetic energy without storing the water to create hydroelectricity. And that is why India can create these run-of-the-river hydroelectric projects on the western rivers of which the water has been allocated to Pakistan. So these are 4 rights that have been provided to India in terms of usage of the waters of even the western rivers which have been allocated to Pakistan. Now, what happens when a dispute or difference arises between the two countries in terms of implementation of the Indus River Water Treaty? So in that case, let us look at the mechanisms that have been created under this Indus Water Treaty. So first and foremost is the Permanent Indus Commission, and this is simply a mechanism for cooperation and information exchange between the two countries regarding the use of the rivers. Now, it has commissioners from both India and Pakistan, and it regularly keeps on meeting. However, when political differences arise between the two countries because of the terrorist attacks by Pakistan, such mechanism is suspended for a few days. For example, the meeting of the Permanent Indus Commission was suspended after the Uri and the Pathankot attacks. However, it has resumed again, and that is why the 118th meeting of the Permanent Indus Commission took place recently. Now, in terms of disputes, there can be 3 types of disputes that can arise between the India and Pakistan as far as the implementation of the Indus Water Treaty is concerned. The first can simply be questions regarding the interpretations of the provisions of the Indus Water Treaty. Now, such questions of interpretations are handled by the Indus Commission itself. However, there can be differences between the two countries regarding the implementation of various projects which have been provided for in the Indus Water Treaty. In that case, such differences can be resolved by a neutral expert. In this case, the decision that is made by the neutral expert will be binding on both the parties. However, in case the neutral expert feels that the scope of the difference that needs to be handled by this expert is beyond the scope of this particular expert, then this neutral expert can refer this matter for the court of arbitration. And as such, these differences then become disputes and they are referred to a 7-member arbitral tribunal, which is called as the court of arbitration. So simply the questions of the interpretations are handled by the commission, and in case of any difference, these are handled by neutral experts which are appointed by the World Bank. And then if the neutral expert is not capable of solving such particular differences, then these differences are considered as disputes and they are referred then to the court of arbitration, which is a 7-member arbitral tribunal. Now, what is the role of the World Bank in this particular treaty? So the role of the World Bank is simply limited and procedural in nature. This because in relation to the differences in the disputes, it is limited to the designation of individuals to fulfill certain roles in the context of neutral expert or court of arbitration proceedings when it is requested by either or both of the parties. Now, at times, issues have arisen as to should a matter be referred to a neutral expert or should it be referred to court of arbitration. And this has been the case in terms of the disputes that are arising out of the hydroelectricity projects that India is implementing on some of these western rivers. So let us look at what are these differences and disputes that have arisen in the past. Now, India has completed various hydroelectricity projects and is also in the process of creating more hydroelectricity projects, which are simply the run-of-the-river projects on these western rivers. Prime examples being the Kishan Ganga, which is a 330 megawatt hydroelectricity project. It has been created on the tributary of Jhelum. Then there is Ratle project, which is a hydroelectric plant, which is also located on a tributary of Chenab. Now, in case of both these projects, there were differences between India and Pakistan had raised concerns. So Pakistan demanded that this matter should be referred to the court of arbitration. However, India demanded that such matter should be referred to only neutral expert as has been provided in the Indus Water Treaty. And because of these divergent demands, there was no consensus as to how this particular issue needs to be handled. And that is why the World Bank created two parallel mechanisms, that is referred the issue to neutral expert also and referred the issue to court of arbitration also. Further, besides the Kishan Ganga and the Ratle Dam, objections have been raised by Pakistan regarding other projects like the Pakuldul and the lower Kalnai hydroelectricity projects which are located on Marusudar River, which is also a tributary of Chenab. However, these issues or differences have been discussed at the meetings of the Permanent Commission. Further, India has also raised the concerns on the issues such as Pakistan's blockade of the Fazilka drain, which has resulted in water contamination in the border areas. Now, this Fazilka drain enters from India into Pakistan, and Pakistan has blocked the entry of this particular drain, leading to issues of untreated polluted water being accumulated along the border on the side of India. So these are certain disputes and differences that have been seen in terms of the implementation of the Indus Water Treaty and its provision. Now let us look at what has been the dissatisfaction of both India and Pakistan regarding the implementation of the Indus Water Treaty on a broader level. Now, as we are aware that the demand for water has been increasing because of the growing population, and as such India is dissatisfied that India is prevented from building any storage system on the western rivers including Indus, Jhelum and Chenab. Further, India has raised the concern that even though the treaty lays out that under certain exceptional circumstances, storage systems can be built. However, such efforts of India have been deliberately stopped by Pakistan because of the political rivalries between India and Pakistan. And as we have already seen, since the treaty's conception in 1960, both these countries have been involved in various conflicts related to different projects. For example, the Salal hydroelectric project on Chenab, Tulbul project, the Kishan Ganga and the Ratle hydroelectricity project. Another concern that has been highlighted is that this treaty is highly technical in nature and which leads to far-ranging differences between the two countries in terms of their interpretation, and that is why such mechanisms have failed to satisfy both these countries. And finally, we all are aware that there is huge political mistrust between both these countries because of the issues of terrorism and Jammu and Kashmir. Now, in this context of the political mistrust, it has been highlighted that India tries to utilize its limited rights which has been provided to it on the usage of water of the western rivers in a maximum way. However, Pakistan, on account of its suspicion towards India, keeps an extra eye on every technical aspect of the project and tries its absolute best to get it suspended. So, because of such political mistrust, at times it becomes difficult to implement the provisions of the Indus Water Treaty on ground. Now, because of the issues and the divergences between India and Pakistan in terms of the implementation of the Indus Water Treaty, a parliamentary committee had recommended certain things related to the Indus Water Treaty. Let us look at these provisions. Now, as we all are aware that India has been provided the right of domestic use, non-consumptive use, agricultural use and hydroelectricity power production plants on the western rivers including Indus, Jhelum and Chenab, which have been allocated to Pakistan under the Indus Water Treaty. In this context, the parliamentary committee has raised the concern that despite increasing demand of water, India has underutilized the water of the western rivers for irrigation purposes. Because irrigation projects are allowed even on the western rivers including Indus, Jhelum and Chenab. Further, we are aware that India has been provided unrestricted right to use the waters of the eastern rivers, that is Ravi, Bias and Satluj. In this line, the parliamentary committee has recommended that the government of India should examine the feasibility of making maximum use of the provisions of the Indus Water Treaty in terms of full utilization of all accessible water of these eastern rivers. And at the same time, the focus should also be on maximum utilization of irrigation and hydropower potential of the western rivers, including the permissible water storage as per the provisions of the treaty. So simply this committee recommends that India should fully utilize all the rights that are available to it in terms of usage of waters of both the eastern rivers as well as the western rivers. Another concern that was raised by the parliamentary committee was that this treaty was formulated back in 1960s and this was framed on the basis of knowledge and technology that was limited or that was existing at that time. But however, now things have changed completely. Also, the perspectives of India and Pakistan around 1960s was only confined to river management and usage of water through construction of dams, barrages, canals or hydropower generation. However, the present day challenges in terms of the sharing of river water are different. And these challenges also include climate change, global warming, environmental impact assessment, etc. And all these were not taken into account in the Indus Water Treaty. So in this context, the parliamentary committee has recommended that there is a need to renegotiate the treaty so as to establish some kind of institutional structure or legislative framework to address the impact of climate change on the water availability in the Indus Basin and also other challenges which were not covered by the treaty back then. So let us summarize whatever we have studied. So basically, the Indus River Water Treaty was finalized in 1960 and this provides the water sharing rights to both India and Pakistan regarding Indus and its tributaries. The western rivers Indus, Jhelum and Chenab, they have been allocated to Pakistan while the eastern rivers have been allocated to India. In terms of eastern rivers, India has been provided unrestricted right to use the water of the eastern rivers. However, in terms of western rivers also, India has been provided certain rights which include domestic use, non-consumptive use, agriculture use as well as generation of hydroelectric projects. Also, the treaty creates permanent Indus Commission and all the differences and the disputes will be handled by the commissions, the neutral experts as well as court of arbitration, which are the institutional mechanisms that have been created by the treaty. However, the role of World Bank in this particular treaty is very limited. Also, differences have arisen in the past and they have been referred to neutral experts, court of arbitration, etc. in the past. And finally, both these countries have raised certain concerns regarding the implementation of the Indus Water Treaty and the political mistrust that exists between both these treaties, which restrict the true implementation of the provisions of the Indus Water Treaty on ground. Because any time when India tries to implement its provision, objections are raised by Pakistan because of the political mistrust that exists between both these countries. And as such, the parliamentary committee had recommended that because the treaty was signed back in 1960 when the knowledge and the technology was limited. However, now there are new challenges which also need to be incorporated in the handling of the Indus River water system. And these include climate change, environment impact assessment, global warming, etc. With this, let's take up the next news article. Besides the news articles that we have covered in today's newspaper, there are two news articles that are important for us from the prelims examination point of view on the international relations page. So on page number 14, there is one news article which reads, "Demilitarize Aegean Islands, says Erdogan." Now, Erdogan is the president of Turkey, and there is a dispute going on between Turkey and Greece related to the islands that are located in the Aegean Sea. Now, as far as the Aegean Sea is concerned, it is part of the Mediterranean Sea and lies in the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea, and it is surrounded by only Turkey and Greece in this regard, and we should be aware of this particular thing. So, this can be an important aspect for us from the prelims examination perspective. Then another article that is there on page number 14 is related to the Israel-Palestine conflict. In this regard, we all are aware that the West Bank and the Gaza Strip are under the Palestinian territory, which has not been recognized as a state internationally. And that is why the locations of West Bank, which lies between Israel and Jordan, is an important location for us from the prelims examination perspective. Then there is Dead Sea, which is located between Israel, Jordan and the West Bank. Further, other locations related to Israel and the Mediterranean Sea have been asked in the prelims examination. For example, the Israel has a border with Mediterranean Sea. A question has been asked regarding if Jordan borders Mediterranean Sea or not. So in this regard, we should be aware that this is the Mediterranean Sea. This is the location of Golan Heights, which shares its borders with both Lebanon and Jordan and is shared by Israel and Syria. This is the location of Gaza Strip, which shares a border with Mediterranean Sea, Israel and Egypt. And this is the location of West Bank, as we can see in the map.
With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Let us now have a look at the question for the day.